So the topic I've chosen for today is food journaling, which is essentially um, creating journal entries out of either out of food related elements or stories, or writing stories where you can add the food as the visual element. So if you think about the occasions where you could use food illustration, apart from the um, recipes, one might think that there is very little opportunity to make any kind of food illustration. But if you're comfortable with making food stuffs, you can look at any occasion to make illustration. Even things like artworks for your kitchen, little maybe cards or something, maybe quirky text on the cards. And also things like travel journals. So when you're traveling, it's you will eat, and very often you will eat exotic items. So it's good fun when you can write stories related to that. But it's difficult to draw. Sometimes it's difficult to draw the activity you're doing. Say you go for a walk in the forest or something. You don't really need to write about the walk in the forest. It's Forests are not very easy to sketch, and they don't always look as fun as food. But if you do have like a picnic meal on that occasion, then you can illustrate the items in the meal, and then write about your forest walk or whatever. So to that end, I want to show you how to make quick sketches and illustrations of uh, whatever you come across in journals specifically, so that you can write stories about that particular activity. So let me share the images that I've selected for today. So this is what's called, I think, a grazing board or a charcuterie board, cheese board. This is quite the trend now. The 2020s is going to be known as the grazing board decade. Everybody and their grandmother seems to be doing this. I certainly love it. And put all sorts of stuff on it. Essentially, it's a whole lot of cheeses and their go-withs. So you have fruit, you have some meat sometimes, crackers, biscuits. I put a whole lot of khakra and dips also, because they are, I mean, those, you can't beat the flavors in khakra. So it's up to you how you want to design this thing. Now, I have also given two other images which have a more generic description of how a cheese board can be curated, one might say, especially this image. And what we're going to try and do today is create this kind of an infographic with illustration, which will speak about all these elements, and we can pick and choose the elements that we want, or we can make this board and write the text from here. So you have, I don't think this fellow has, yeah, you have some dried fruit here or nuts, you have olives, some hard cheeses, some soft cheeses, some fruit, crackers, pretty good. This one is even more pretty actually, but it's got a lot of text in between. I think we can do this also, but I don't know if tomatoes is a good thing, but why not? And this is very descriptive. I think maybe we can just do this one because it has got all the descriptions, and the element, the color coordination of all the elements is very nice. Is this carrot? I don't know if it's carrot. We'll or is it apricots? I have no clue what this is. So we'll figure it out, or we'll make it as apricots. Okay, so I will I will show you how I'm going to do this illustration, and we can do it directly in pen. You don't need to make it in pencil first, other than like we did last time, just a general size to get a proportion. Now this time, if you want, we can make the illustration vertical, but it's not going to be really big. So we'll just make it still only so much. So there's ample room on all sides of the paper. I'll make it about this big, no bigger than that. I have about 2 inches or so on either side of my, or from the edges. The reason for
Which one are we doing? The last one?
we'll do the last one because it's pretty straightforward. But if you want to add more elements, what we can do is we'll make the last one, the tray, and then we can add a few more elements on the sides to bulk this up if we want to. All right. So I'll just share screen again and give you a strategy. Now, all these are just shapes. So we just have to imitate the different shapes that we see. Right. So the grapes are fairly straightforward. And if you notice that everything is repeated more or less, many things are repeated and spread over so that you don't have to, if you lay this out on one table, everyone is able to pick up something from their end of the board. They don't have to go across. So like, for example, the crackers are there as well as here. You have these grapes or apricots, whatever they are, or dry fruit over here, here, and here. Then, of course, you have the grape, which is here, here, and here. So that's 3 of the grapes. Then we have cured meats are distributed. There are 4 or 5 different types, but you have olives just in one case, dip only in one place, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of cured meats. So that's 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cured meats. Cheeses, you have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, and the brie here 5. So if you notice, all the elements are distributed and the space is just filled up. So we are just going to make a loose illustration like this, and then after we filled up the space, we will make the shape of the cheese board around it. Now this cheese board is very boring. So if you want, you can make one with handles or some kind of decoration if you want also. So the first thing to do, because now this is all seen from the top, just draw a loose rectangle. Now, again, when you're making this rectangle, make sure that the edges are at 90 degrees. Don't make it into a rhombus. So turn it to its side and check that you have 90-degree angles on the side. Don't use a scale here because this is just a guideline. This is just for you to position your tray, and we are going to make all the elements in pen, and the proportions are definitely going to change. So what I normally do is start off with at least what you can do is start off with demarcating areas for the large distinct elements. So you have the grapes in 1, a little above half, this is 2, and this corner 3 areas. Then you have these circles, circular cheeses and bowls. You have one here, two here, there's a jam here. Then there's another dip here, a brie here. And get these circles to be in the proportion that you can see them. All this is sizing and proportions. And in relation to these, now you make the other shape. So you have a triangular cheese slice over here. You have one cheese slice somewhere over here with the rind visible. And you have one slab of cheese over here. So now we've broken up the space quite well. And with this, now we can just fill up the rest of the elements. Okay, at any point, if you have any questions, you can't see some things that I'm describing and you would like me to show them to you, please speak up, because otherwise I'm just going to assume that you've understood it, which is very possible also. You might have just understood it. But don't hesitate to stop me and ask me for clarification if you get muddled up. Because when there are so many things that you have to illustrate, you might either forget in what position you have to put something, or you might make it too big or too small. Often you would forget to put something or the other, right? So let's start with the grapes here. And I'm going to make only I'm using a 0.1 because this is going to be quite detailed. They're very tiny, not too big. So I'm just making these oval shapes like I see in the picture. They are on a stem, so I'm going to draw part of the stem as well. And then I'm drawing a bulk of the grapes underneath the ones on top. So always draw the ones that you can see on top or in front, and then the ones below. Now, if you notice, the shape I'm making is fairly loose, and I would like you to hold the pen a little far away and just make a very casual shape of the grape. If you make it in a particular size, it won't matter whether it's, even if there's an overlap, all these things won't matter. Now I've drawn the soft cheese pretty far away. So I'm going to bring it closer, and I'm going to make a circle which is not totally a sharp line. Keep it a loose line, and I have to fill in this gap with the grapes. So I'm making extra grapes because the size of my grape has turned out to be smaller than is in the picture. Now on this side, on the right, and moving towards, say, 4 o'clock from the center of the circle, there are crackers. And if you notice, the crackers are all leaning against the cheese. So I'm going to draw this cracker on the rightmost end, which is a shape like this. It's a line at an angle of maybe 75 degrees to the horizontal. And then it's got a short curve and a straight line, which doesn't go horizontal, which also goes to that 45, no, sorry, what degree? Maybe 75 degree again on the other side. So this will give me the slices, and I'm making a parallel line. So what I've done is just look at the shape. Now, there are about 5 or 6 of these crackers. I've managed to draw just 3. And I'm going to make a few dots and shapes within this to represent the grain or whatever I see that they're made out of. Then we have a bowl of olives. Now, after so much is drawn, I'm recalibrating my space. Look at the space between the cheese and the olive. It's a little more than is necessary because there's just one small river of prosciutto in the middle. So my edge needs to come inside a little bit. That's why the pencil drawing helps. How much inside? Just so much maybe. And the two circles are not in line with each other like that. They're off a little bit. So the trick is to constantly keep calibrating. Now I need some of my olives to come outside of the edge of my bowl. So I'm going to make the bowl shape in pencil and draw heaps of olives. These olives are deliberately made outside of the circle. And then I'm going to complete the shape of my bowl around these. Just go over the pencil line. Give a small ridge to this little bowl and make more olives underneath it. Now this looks like a whole filled up bowl of or over filled up bowl of olives. So what you must remember at every point is the pencil line is only a guideline and you have to keep checking if your sizing, placement, proportions are accurate and you have to keep tweaking them. It's like fine tuning your illustration. You don't need to erase the existing lines if they're drawn lightly. You will be able to register where the new elements will come. Now, in this case, my clump of grapes will come somewhere here. So the reason I'm making these shapes so casual is because these you can make very fast. If we try and create really realistic fruit, it'll take us 4 days to create this board. And that's a great ambition. I would love to do that because food illustration is just absolutely fun. But unfortunately, that's something that you will not be able to do very frequently unless it's like a commissioned piece of art. So you'll end up not illustrating at all. But if you learn to do quick sketches, at least you can start creating the illustrations. And over time, you realize that the quality of your illustrations just automatically starts becoming better and better and better. And then there is the confidence, the vision that develops where you can then easily sit and plan a 4 day realistic illustration of a grazing board. So that's a more productive way of planning refined art. Now here there's a jar of jam, I think. So I see it as from the top, a circle, and the jar is on one side of the circle. The jam is on the inside, which we are just going to color. So it's not three concentric circles because of the angle of the photography. I have made this chunk of cheese here, and I think there are the blueberries over here. So for the blueberries, I'm making almost like cloud shapes, but I'm giving a certain dimension to these cloud shapes. So I am actually drawing the individual globules of the blueberries. And we will be coloring them exactly like that with circles. Now, before I draw the rest of the blueberries, I will draw these slivers of prosciutto. Because they're supposed to look like slivers, I'm going to draw them in this manner. I'm going to draw one edge, and then from this edge, you will have folds of the ham visible. And on one side, it's got very lovely marbling. And I'm essentially just drawing the same shapes that I see. On the top, there are some walnuts, which we can draw with lines which are like that. These are, I think, broken up walnuts, so you won't see them whole. And now remember, the new edge of our board is somewhere over here. So anything that's close to the edge should now be drawn a little on the inside. So our apricots will come somewhere here. It could go even further, I think. But I'm going to extend this a little bit. I've made the cheese a little further outwards, so my edge is definitely not going to be there. Yeah, maybe here at the most. All these lines we can erase afterwards. So you must draw them fairly light. There's some more cold meats here, which are also drawn as slices. So anytime you have a slice, you must draw an edge, whether it's a slice of a lemon or meats or cheese. Always draw an edge which indicates the thickness of that slice. If there are multiple slices, make the edges different, varied. They don't have to be the same kind of edge, because that looks too mechanical and too artificial. And the edge is generally always two parallel lines. So don't let it to go awry too much. And now we'll fill this up with all the same elements. So if you have any extra blank spaces, fill them up with blueberries or apricots, and everything will start looking very filled up soon. Okay, are you getting it? Yeah? All right. So I'll now let you figure out the rest of the board, because it's exactly the same elements. There are slices of meats. Some are horizontal, just sliced and spread out like that. Here there are slices of crackers, which we just see from the top. So it's just rectangular lines with edges. And I will be drawing them. So if you feel that you are lost somewhere and you need more help, let me know. But I would like you to try it and come up with any problems if you face them. Here there are almost medallion-like slices of salami. So in some places you'll see them just as crescent shapes like this, overlapped into each other. This could be even sausage or something. And in some places you will just see the tops of the slices. So pay attention to the shapes that you see. And anyway, we are making a very casual illustration. So some of the shapes can be a little wonky. It won't matter. Be right back. Now these slices of bread, you must try to maintain their relative widths. That way they will look like they're just one loaf of crackers. Now, when you come down to this, after we've followed through, say, the top, the middle, here again, there is a different kind of overlap. You might not be able to start from the top of this section and move downward because there are other elements that overlap certain sections, certain items which come on top here. So we can redraw them, redraw the outlines like this cheese slice will come inside. This is becoming even longer now. Redraw the soft cheese a little inside, the blueberries here, the apricots here, the grapes still remain here. So you can create, there's no rule that says that you cannot keep drawing pencil lines again and again and again, so that you're constantly gauging your guidelines and making them more and more accurate. You don't have to make the pencil lines just once in the beginning and then adhere to that. You can keep changing them. So for the dip also, make the outside circle slightly more refined, but the inside circle you can make it a little less refined, and also you can create these swirls. Now we have those walnuts again. The shape of the crackers. For the rosemary, you can just draw some long oval shapes in one direction. Rosemary is very predictable, easy to sketch. So what I'm trying to do now is, as I'm filling, you'll notice that even if there are gaps in between, they're either very little or they are about the same everywhere. Not too many gaps and not too large. Now, if you've managed to do that, great. But if you feel that you haven't managed that, then you can always increase the closest element and fill up that gap. So if I feel that the gap over here is too much, I can always add another grape here and fill this up. the shape of and the size of our grapes and apricots is pretty much the same. Huh? So when you're painting, paint very carefully. Don't make the apricots into grapes and vice versa, because in this particular case, those colors also make a big difference. So when you're painting, paint slowly. And we have some blueberries here. Now there's a lot of blank space on the top right. So I'm thinking I would like to add some more elements there. So I could add a few
I added the orange apricots.
over there.
Yeah.
Ah, good. I'm adding a few walnut shapes there. And I think orange apricots also is a good idea. Okay. Now, after everything is done, we can now create
Done with the
our
whole plate thing.
what?
I completed the whole thing with the chopping board or whatever it is.
Yeah, the board underneath, no? Good. Okay, now I'll do that. So when doing that, please remember to not make sharp corners for your board. Even if in the picture it looks like it's a very sharp corner, turn it around and make it slightly rounded. Just like this, just a little rounded. Because in an illustration, these sharp corners can look very misleading. They look very geometric. My trick is to keep these lines deliberately a little less perfect. Maybe make multiple lines over here also. Okay, so now we can erase all our pencil lines. Use a flexible eraser and first roll the eraser on top of your illustration. This way, all the excess lead will be picked up without disturbing the surface of the paper. And then if there are some places where the lead is a little too stubborn, then you can press a little harder. And of course, around the picture, you could easily just sweep the eraser and
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I have very enthusiastic Siri, and I don't know how to turn her off. Okay. So this is it. Now we are also going to write the text, how to make the perfect charcuterie board. So we need to figure out that in this layout, where can we fit that text? It doesn't always have to be in the same place. It can be at the bottom if you've got space at the bottom. So how to make a or the perfect charcuterie board. And then also you want space to to show the rest of the elements. So mark these things out in pencil just a little bit. The charcuterie board can come over here. The text should be closer to the illustration than the edge of the paper. So don't make your lettering too close to the edge. And we are making baselines like I had explained last time. So this can be the perfect, and how to make can just be in one line. And you will leave space around. This is called text warp, where the text warps around the illustration. So our text just will be how to make the perfect. The can be a little smaller. Perfect. But the T will come out just a little bit so that we can get this nice warp over here. And always write the spelling in, especially French spellings, in rough first, because they are just crazy. Charcuterie board. It's also good to figure out how much space we have. Ideally, write in such a way that the right and left side, you have equal blank spaces. So in this case, the letter D has gone too far. That means that I might get a better result if I reduce the height of my letters a little bit. So we're going to do all of this next month. You don't need to work towards a perfect lettering style. In fact, we're going to keep it casual, but still within that casual, we need to maintain some kind of balance of layout to make the whole illustration look pretty. Okay, now after this is done, let's start painting. And painting is all about just matching colors and splashing them onto our cheese board. It's almost as fun as just throwing this cheese board together. Okay, Dipti, how are you doing? This is your first class today, so I wanted to check if you're. Is it okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good. If you have any,
We'll
if you have
need
any
to go
questions-
back to recording.
Yeah, that might be required the first few times, but if even right now, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to
Yes.
just pause and ask me.
No, at the end, I will have a very general question.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
So, yeah, during the Q&A session.
all right.
And yeah, okay.
Okay, so now since
Yes.
our
You made it very easy. It was looking very complicated, but you made it very easy.
Okay, good. Great. I'm glad you found that
Yes.
that's easy to be done. Right. So I'm going to use small size brushes, nothing more than a size 6 for this, because we have got very tiny spaces here. So we will be using maybe a 0 or 1 for the detailing and 4 to 6 for some of the larger areas. The first thing we are going to do is give a light wash for the board, which we can't do later on. And if you study carefully, you'll notice that apart from some of the cheeses, you might just be able to go over or most of the elements, even with that wood color. So I'm making a very neutral brown shade like this, which is a combination of yellow ochre and burnt umber, which is here. Now, all these colors will make the board seem very yellow and brown, but when it dries up, it will become rather pale. The consistency of the paint is slightly on the, it's mostly just normal, say like a lotion consistency, but it has a little more water so that the paint spreads very easily. So I'm going to firstly mix enough paint so that you can see that it can be spread across this board. Even though it feels like there are a lot of elements on the board, you need to be able to spread it in this area. So about the same area of color should be mixed. If your color is looking too brown or too yellow, though we may have the same board, the same color cakes, if you want to make it a little dull, you can add a little bit of ultramarine blue, and that makes the color a little duller, but you'll have to use a very light wash of this. So whenever you're giving a wash, hold your book slightly at an angle so that there's a natural flow and press your brush down. As you come to the element,
Ma'am, can you repeat which colors you used?
yellow ochre, burnt umber, and if you feel you want to make it slightly duller, then use ultramarine blue.
Okay.
All right. Now paint very carefully around the cheeses because some of them are white, so you don't want any brown in it. But when you have the breads and meats, some of this paint can go over, even the walnuts, it can go over. So that allows you to spread out the paint much nicer. Even some of the grapes, it's fine. The next color that we're going to make is going to be much deeper, so it won't really matter. If part of your paint is coming outside the board, that's also fine. The style in which we have painted this is so casual that patches, color standing out of the line, all of that is actually going to enhance this casual illustration look and feel of our artwork. So remember to spread the brush so that the paint, when you're painting with just the tip, you get a very small area that you'll fill up, but also the color can be a little more concentrated there. In this particular case, it won't matter because all those places eventually we are going to put some shadows. Let's say you come to a place like this, it takes a little longer, but if you spread the brush out, you can cover a larger area, and it also gives a very nice variation in the application of the color. Now keep a rag handy so that if you feel your colors, you have too much color, just wipe your brush on the rag. Make sure to replenish the paint in your brush before the brush goes completely dry. Don't wait for all the pigment to finish off and then dip it. So make a few strokes. When you start sensing that the brush is probably going a little dry, then you can use dip your brush again. If you have used a thin layer of paint, then this should dry fairly quickly. And then what you can do is take your thin brush and immediately make certain shadows over here. So and all the shadows should ideally be on the same side. So I'm making them on the right and right bottom. So all I'm doing is sweeping the brush in a crescent shape from the right. And the reason why right is because as a right-handed person, it's just more convenient for me to do it that way. And in an illustration, something like this, we just need to create some amount of contrast, width, and depth. And it doesn't necessarily need to be accurate because nobody is going to be privy to the reference image. But when you see this image, everything will be, all the information on this image should be impressive and to some extent perpetuate the same illusion. So,
Aditi,
yeah.
for the shadows, do we have to make a darker shade or is it the same shade fine?
It's the same shade. It's the same
Okay.
shade, but when you take it in a thinner brush,
Yeah.
you will apply it in a smaller area. It will automatically create a darker glaze.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, in making of the shadows, if you make some shadows in the wrong place, for some reason, unless it is a prominent part of the picture, I think the brain doesn't even register it. So don't get too nervous about, am I making it in the right place? Am I getting confused? It's okay if the shadow in some places is on the right and then suddenly it goes to the bottom, or sometimes it comes to the left by mistake. Don't do it on purpose, but if it happens by mistake, it will not be too bad. So don't fret over that. Now, depending upon how much pigment you had in your brush, when you made the second round, you'll notice that you have a certain darkness of your shadow. In the event that your pigment was less, you might not get a very dark shadow, then you can make the same color and go over this again and again also to keep making it deeper and deeper and deeper. Eventually, we can add a little bit of black, but that is going to be the last stage. We won't do that right now because we don't want it running over into the rest of our elements. Next, let's make some of the cheeses. Now, getting the cheese color is a little tricky. Oh, what happened to Karan? It's bleeding. Can I see? Can I see your pen and your illustration also, and how much it is bleeding? Okay, which pen are you using?
It's a art line pen. 1 minute, I'll give.
Okay. Always look for archival ink on your pens. And if you don't have this, just use, sometimes a gel pen also works better than some of the other drawing pens. And worst case scenario, just use a dark pencil. Even that is better because that doesn't run. Okay. So, Karan, it does not say archival ink or waterproof ink, right? Or fade proof ink. Okay, so look out for that in the pen that you use. There are 3 different pens like these, which you can use for drawing and then painting over. I have used Artline like that, and I've also suffered it. So now, if you want, if you've got color pencils, try making the rest of the illustration with color pencil, because that will also be fun.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
And I'll redo this.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now the colors for the cheeses have to be rather subtle. So what I normally do is, instead of painting the whole cheese, I give it just a little bit of a hint of color. So I'll take gamboge and yellow ochre, and this makes for a slightly yellowish shade. But instead of painting that over every cheese, because the color of the cheese is also very significant, I will just put it like a wash in some places, especially in the place where there's another object over it. Or I will do this. I'll just press the brush. So I just get a hint of color and it's not all over. So it's very suggestive. And there is something that happens that even if there's a little color on some items, again, the brain fills up the information that it needs to and just tells you, acha, theek hai, looks like this is cheese. Theek hai, fine. We'll assume that it is cheese. And we'll just play with that, because making a light cheese color is nearly impossible with the shades that we have. The same thing you can do for these crackers also. Maybe a little more yellow ochre than gamboge, and paint again in just stripes like that. So just in on the lines, don't go over the entire slice. So that will give us this little bit of a artificial highlight. And there are some holes in this bread. So I'm trying to create those with just some switches of color. Many of these colors look different after we fill out the colors in the neighborhood. So while this might look a little dull or yellow, it will change its shade once we put the pinks and browns and dark berries around them. The herb cheese on top over here, you can use the same mixture, but this time add a touch of green. So I'll just show you how I do this. I will touch my brush to gamboge, touch it to yellow ochre, and then touch it to the green, and then give a wash like that. So it's all very subtle. And afterwards, I'll make a little bit of a green texture on this with the brush. Is everyone with me? If you need me to slow down, please let me know.
What color did you use for the cheese?
For this cheese,
Yeah, that one.
I used a dab of gamboge and yellow ochre.
And for the rest?
For this one, gamboge,
Yeah,
yellow
that one
ochre.
I got for the block.
Everything else I've used the same.
Okay.
Now for the rind, I'll be using a different color.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Now this cheese, the rind looks a little bit like a dull burnt sienna. So I'll take a very watery burnt sienna, again dab in a little bit of yellow ochre and make a few marks like this. I deliberately am not painting it flat. So press it sideways, a few marks on overlapping one on top of the other, get some kind of texture going here. And leave it after most of the area is stained. It will dry out and it will look nice. And for this one, we need a little bit of gamboge, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna, I think. And it's a little deeper towards the bottom, just because it is a slice. So apply it light on top and deeper towards the bottom so that it creates the illusion of a curved slice that has been placed here. Now let's paint the apricots. This cheese is white now. So to make it look like it's white, we will give it a little gray tinge. Now this gray, which I call a generic gray, is a mixture of black, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. And it usually sits in some corner on my palette every time. And I just hydrate a little bit of that with the tip of my brush. And I will just give a little edge like that to the cheese on any one side. And maybe the shadow of these herbs underneath it. But I won't go all the way. This much is enough. So you can imagine if that is the amount of gray I need, how much I should mix up. So it's only the tip. Now I found that a lot of beginners, when you are mixing colors, we'll just take all the color and just keep mixing and making bigger and bigger puddles. And we just have this whole lake of some shade or the other. But always remember that the volume of pigment that you mix should be in proportion to the size of the painting that you're making. And it's perfectly fine to mix very tiny puddles of paint also, just with the tip of your brush, and use it and finish it off. We can use that same gray, but this time you can add a little bit of a brown, any brown. So I'm bringing that gray into this area, which was the cheese board base. And I'm using this brown shade to create some shadow and color together in the dip. Now remember,
Now it looks like mayonnaise.
mayonnaise, yeah, it could be mayonnaise. So always do remember that shadows are not black or gray. Shadows are often just the deeper color of whatever the color of that particular element is. So if this is like a beigeish color or yellowish beige color, I think it's looking a little yellow also. Its shadow will just be a deeper shade of that. Okay, now moving on to olives. Is everyone with me?
Yes, miss.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So olives, the color to mix for olives is a combination of shades, which we'll mix in almost like a medley. So you have the first color will be yellow ochre and sap green. And these are, olives particularly are looking rather yellowish. So make sure that this green is not too green. Otherwise, it will interfere with the color harmony of the entire cheese board. There's no green in this except for the rosemary. So if we have very green olives, then that whole warm tone of our cheese board will get affected. And these things are important. So we need a green that is very close to yellow. And oh, wait a minute. Before you paint this, because these bowls are also white bowls, use a little bit of our gray, the generic gray, to make some shadows on the rim. This is just a swoosh of color. And we can make the deeper shade afterwards, but make one shade in the crevices before, because otherwise it just looks very dull. And then just make a highlight. And we painted these kinds of fruit before. I think a little more yellow will be fine. And for each olive, you can keep changing the color. Some of them can be greener, some of them can be yellower, some of them can be lighter, so that you can paint that with a little extra water. And some of them are also slightly redder. So to this itself, you can add maybe a burnt umber color, and your olive green will become like a slightly redder olive green. The highlights are quite important because they will make the olives shine and look very appetizing. Something about shiny fruit, I don't know, that at least in pictures, make your fruit very shiny, fruit and vegetables. I'm sure there is some, I'm sure it's because the plumper the fruit is or vegetable is, the fresher it is. And when it has full color, it's the most attractive. That's why a shiny highlight will make it look like it's ready to eat. I'm waiting a little bit for these olives to dry so that my color doesn't run. And in the meantime, I'm using a mix of orange and gamboge to create the apricot color. Now, normally I advise you to make the color in your palette. And even now, that's a great idea. My palette is full, and because the colors that we are making are so tiny, I'm literally being a little lazy. So orange and gamboge. And even this, don't apply it with the tip, apply it like this. Press the brush a little bit. So automatically in some places you have dense color, in some places you will have slightly lighter color. Once you mix one color, if the element repeats in multiple places, color all of them at the same time. That way you don't have to keep mixing the same color over and over again. And now we've come to that stage where the individual elements have been painted. So now we can print the bulk repeat elements, right? Now if you paint the apricots first over here, you will not need to remember they're not grapes. I'm taking a little extra of the same color and making a few more lines for depth. And you can literally make them like the previous shadows that we made. Just slap them on in a few places. Okay, all the apricots are done. Now we can make the meats in different colors. So here, this is all just a play of mostly scarlet and crimson. So hydrate these colors. And also, if you're not confident about your colors, keep a rough paper handy so you can test the shade before you paint it. I should have advised you to do that before, but that's like a standard thing. Like you would have water when you're doing watercolor, you should have a test paper. And paint as you see it. So I see the color in stripes over here. This is scarlet and crimson. So I'm going to paint it in those kind of stripes. Leave a thick rind around it. So I'll leave that thick rind. And I paint a little away from that parallel line edge that we have made. Now make sure though, when you come to the end, to this corner, that you finish this. Don't leave it hanging. Those hanging blank spaces can be like a booby trap. They unnecessarily draw attention to that part of the painting where you don't want. For the prosciutto as well, it's pretty much the same, but a very, very watery shade. So I'm dabbing my brush on a rag and deliberately pressing my brush. If pressing is not your thing, then have more water than pigment. I think a little scarlet might do. And eventually you will not need, it becomes a very instinctive exercise, knowing how much pigment you have in your brush. You know when your color is going to be dark, when it's going to be light. But till then, it always helps to make your first stroke on a rough sheet and test out for yourself that that is the shade you want. Keep your strokes very light and frivolous, I would say. Once you have stained the paper, even if you feel you want to make some changes, don't do them right away. Move on, let that shade or let that first application dry, and then you can paint over. Now, in some of the meats, like over here, there are certain white spots. So I will leave some white areas like that and paint a light shade first and then come back and make a darker shade over there. In most food illustration, the application of the paint needs to be a little less perfect because otherwise it starts looking very plastic. So you must have seen, all of you must have seen artificial flowers, right?
Yes.
So the paints that are taken to create imperfections in plastic molding so that they look more real than artificial. The whole point of artificial flowers is to imitate natural flowers. But plastic molding can be done so perfect. But then how do you, like if you want to create a spray of pollen in the center of a flower, a regular plastic molding machine would give you exactly the same spray throughout. Or if you have to mold a petal, you will have exactly the same petal throughout. But I think they take a lot of pains in creating certain discrepancies, built-in discrepancies, so that the artificial plant or flower looks deliberately imperfect and therefore more natural. It's so ironic. Now try to make the colors match according to your how you see them. So in this case, if this was too pink, the meat slices over here are a little dull, so you might dab a little bit of burnt umber into your reds. And again, first do a light wash. Okay, all the meats are done. For the dark crackers over here and at the bottom, I'm making a mixture of burnt umber and just a little bit of yellow ochre, just to keep the burnt umber a little muted. And again, the same way, don't paint the whole thing, leave a little highlight on the top. So just from the edges. And then later on, I'm going to paint the sides a little darker and paint them in a texture like this. Now here we also have walnuts. So I will paint the walnuts in, I think, just yellow ochre, a few strokes of yellow ochre, just dabs, no more. That should be enough. And then this. Now the jam inside this jar is a mixture of crimson and ultramarine blue, but this will make it too purple. So add a little bit of burnt umber. And though in the photograph, we don't really see much of the jam, it's just like a blob of dark purple. Over here, you can make it less dark so that it looks like something. And this too can be painted in 2-3 layers. So first few strokes are just like this. And then you can, after this is dried, you can come in with a deeper color in which you can also add some black. So you start
Ma'am,
getting,
which color was this again?
this was crimson, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber.
Okay, okay.
Now, finally, we have come to the berries. The grapes I'm making with ultramarine blue, a little bit of crimson, and black. So this is how I'll mix the color. I've mixed ultramarine blue and crimson and black on the side, and I'll keep changing the color that I will take. I might add a little more crimson on the side as well. So all three colors are available for me to pick up. And I'm going to use a thin brush for this. Starting out with a slightly lighter shade and making those highlights as I paint. Again, over here, even if the paint runs all over the place a little bit, it's not a big deal. Keep an eye on those highlights. Now, the highlights should be made on slightly to the side, not on, never in the center in a picture, because it just looks very odd. It just looks like there's a hole in it. And when I say side, it should not be touching the side, because then again, that looks a little unnatural. So this is how you make it a little off center. And as you are painting, keep dipping into one of the different shades. So in some places, your grapes will be a little bluer. In some places, they'll be a little blacker. Some places, they'll be a little more purple. So you get multiple shades, and that will make it look more convincingly like a bunch of grapes. Now, when painting this, if you want to, and if you're more comfortable, you can paint with the tip because it's a small area. I still try to press the brush so that I get a variation in color even there. Now, because we have these blueberries or blackberries, sorry, we have to make the color of the grapes slightly different from the blackberries. So this, they will just all merge into each other.
We could make them a bit more darker
Yeah.
and add some more black.
Yeah, you can add black to that. Okay, so I will finish the rest later because it's already 6:30 now. So I want to show you the blackberries and then move on to a little bit of contrast building. So to the same color of grapes, I've added a little bit of black, and my painting is going to be in circles like that. So I'm literally going to try and paint each of those segments of the blackberry, and in doing so I'll automatically start getting that shape. So the circles on top are bigger and have more white space and have a lighter color, or you can create a wash on that afterwards. And the circles on the outside are deeper in color so that they look like there is a shadow. This is how I'll do it. Bigger circles towards the center and slightly, or with a lighter color, and then slightly more obscured circles towards the outside where there will be no light, like this. And you can go extremely dark black also in those spaces. Now, after this is done, you realize that there are certain places which are not getting enough attention, or there isn't enough contrast. So you take a combination of that generic gray shade and also a little bit of the original shade of our wooden board and deepen the color by adding either more brown or blue or black. And use some of those shades to start creating more contrast. So in this case, it was yellow ochre, burnt umber, and black.
Ma'am, can I leave?
Yes,
I
yes,
have to
yes.
go.
Yeah. Those of you who have to leave, please go ahead. I'm just doing this last part, and then later on, I will be doing the lettering and the labeling, and I'll share it with you. So just in a few places, in a smaller space than the initial shadow that we made, you can create more darker shades of the shadow. Now, this helps in just pushing up all these ingredients up from the board a little bit by adding more depth. So wherever we have dark colors, you can avoid making more black over there. But wherever we have lighter colors, you can add just a few strokes, not too many. Don't color the whole area. And that will help pull everything up just a little bit. And another thing that you can do is use this generic gray color, and wherever items are overlapping, run it along that edge. It's a very subtle color. You will barely see it, but it makes such a difference in the painting. You won't even notice that it's there, but it will create the shadows that you need to create the illusion of stacking one on top of the other. So just a little shadow over here, like that. That's good enough. And that's about it. Now we can, of course, add a little bit of green here, sap green and cobalt blue to create a bluish green shade for the rosemary. And just paint the strands very loosely and then add a few of these strands in the herb cheese. Use some deep brown to create the stalk of the grapes if you have drawn them. And that's about it. This is how you can create your cheese board. Okay, now do you have any questions, anyone?
No, I just wanted to ask you a general question.
Yeah.
No, it was fascinating to see this cheese board coming to life. And it was really
Okay,
very cool
thanks.
artwork. I just want, being a very beginner and not an art person, I am always inspired by some very different styles which you find on Instagram. Like some are, some recipe illustrations are like some things are painted very loosely and the bottles and all kept in a line work or something,
Right.
or not too much of a detailing or something. Yeah. So it is because we don't have our own style, it is very difficult to decide what style you really want in your illustration. So, which is the, the doable kind of, or there is sometimes it is use of mixed media, like there are pencils, there are brush pens, and there are colors. So how one should decide, or which things will go good with pencil, which things will go with brush pens, or easily being done.
Okay, so in the beginning, suppose you come across an illustration of fruit and vegetables that has been made in pastel and chalk pastel. So you can see it, you can see pastel, you can see the fruit and vegetables, you find that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And in your head, you have some kind of recipe that you want to illustrate. And it's got more or less the same kind of fruits and vegetables. You can say, okay, I'll try the pastels for these fruits and vegetables. I just have to change the color, the application. I'll kind of figure out with the inspiration image that I have in front of me. So that's how you begin with figuring out what feels nice for you, because all the mediums are available for you. You can choose whichever you like at whatever time you want to. And I would say don't even restrict yourself as saying, I only do watercolor, I only do color pencil. So these are just labels that make other people comfortable. What kind of art do you do? Do you do watercolors? And then they know where to bracket you. But you shouldn't even think about things like that. So if you are inspired by something that you see on the internet, the thing that I like to recommend is that use the style for something similar. You don't need to copy the same thing, but you get an idea of how, like, say you're making a tomato with just scribbled charcoal or colored pastels, and you've made a very loose round shape for the tomato, and then you just scribbled. You can use the same thing to paint a brinjal also if you want to, or a mirchi also, because you have to just change the shape, you know which color to pick, and then you also do the same loose style. So it is copy the application, change the topic. and try that with the composition and with the lettering and all, and see how you like it. So in the beginning, it happens that we see a lot of these things, but we don't know what we are going to like consistently.
Yes,
And
yes, exactly.
in some cases, some compositions work, some application works for in some recipes, but in some it doesn't work at all. Like if you take utensils or something, there's lots of utensils. Like if you're making something, if you're writing the recipe of Shrikhand or something, which has all these different types of utensils, which are very difficult to make look like steel or like brass in charcoal, in your pastel. So that will not work. But unless you do it, you won't know whether or not that loose style is good for that recipe or not. Right? So try out different things, and look for quick substitutions. So instead of tomato, brinjal. Yes, will it work? It will work. But instead of tomato, if I have to draw a utensil, can't say. I'll have to make a test, see if it works. Otherwise, let me look for something else.
It's quite a trial and error.
Yeah, and do it. It's good fun.
And the proportion of water has always been challenging for me.
Yeah.
Mixing the water, it goes very dilute or it is thick. So
right.
If we use those water-filled brushes, you can control the water in it, or
no. So don't use water brushes. Are, I think, best only when you're traveling and when you're making a quick sketch, because literally the water in that, the amount of water that comes into the brush head changes from place to place depending upon air pressure also. So when I use that brush in flight, because there is so much pressure, a lot of water comes into the brush head.
Okay.
So weather, temperature, pressure, all of that affects a water brush. But it is great if you are just, say if you're going for a hike or something, you don't want to carry a water container and a rag and bhando and everything. Then just a little kit of colors, a water brush and a small diary, then it's fine, because you're just going to dab a little color, put it in place. It doesn't matter. But for a proper painting, use proper brushes. Then with water consistency, that is also trial and error. In time, you will figure out. Your hand while mixing will know what is the kind of consistency and volume that
it has stopped, I think.
Sorry?
That was
yeah, so okay, so first is the size of brush. If you have a small area, use a small brush. Large area, use a large brush. And if it's a wash, use a flat brush. When you are mixing the paint, the consistency, there are different types of consistency. So when you say mix it on your palette, when you keep it flat, you won't know. But when you lift the lid a little bit, and when the paint runs a lot, that means that there is a lot, the medium is very wet. And when you are mixing it, and it is slightly thickish, but it covers the surface of the palette very smoothly, like almost like lotion, hand lotion, or like liquid soap, then that is the consistency which, if you paint in small areas, you will get an even tone, an even application without any smudges and without any clouds. Now, if when you are mixing the paint, if your brush is dragging, that means obviously you need to add more water. So less water you can figure out very easily. The more water part is a big range. How much more water is good, and then too much more water you want to avoid, right? So what you do is you look at the brush when you have filled up the brush, when it's loaded. If you see that there is like a blob at the bottom, that means the brush is loaded too much. So it needs to retain its shape. whatever shape it is. If it's a flat brush, it should look like a flat brush. If it is a round brush, it should have this tip. If it has a tip, but if it has too much, that means if the tip spreads out a bit, that means there's too much medium in it. And there's a chance that that medium also has a lot of water. So you can reduce this a little bit on the palette or dab it a little on your rag and then apply on a rough paper. And then you will be able to see whether you've got the consistency right. The shade also needs to be right. Sometimes too much water makes
too much
it
water
very
makes
light.
it dilute.
Yeah. So that you can check as just doing one stroke on a rough sheet of paper. And then if that one stroke seems good, come back to your artwork and paint that. And again, replenish the medium before the brush goes completely dry. So make maybe 2-3 strokes at best, and then quickly get more paint and paint the next, because that way then it's like water molecules holding hands. If they don't hold hands, then there is a patch in between where the water has dried. So you need to put the next water molecule right next to the earlier water molecule. Like, okay, before you dry, take this one, hold his hand, then hold this one's hand, then this one's hand, this one's hand. So you make those layers in that manner before the previous one dries. And then you start getting it more even. But testing on the rough paper, at least the first month or so, will really help you to just instinctively know how much paint is enough, whether it's the right shade or not. All of that you know. So you have shade, you have consistency and volume of medium in the brush. All these three things have to be tested out.
What are the supplies you use?
Yeah, I use this Camlin 18C18.
Okay.
And the brushes are also from Camlin. These are a series called the S68.
Okay. Okay.
And I use them in just 4 sizes. I use a 1, 4, 6, and 10. These are enough. So you don't need to get the whole kit. But if you get the kit, well and good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And in the other 3 recordings, one is the recipe illustration. So how to plan and like it is there covered in that recording, isn't it?
How to plan what?
Well, how to plan it, like the process or
the layout?
Recipe. Layout, you can say.
Yes, that's there.
It's
Yeah.
there. I have yet to go to that particular recording. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. So next week we are going to start lettering, but we are not, don't get any mediums right now. I'm going to introduce the different kinds of pens that we will use, and I'll give you time to pick up those pens. So next week, we're just going to use our regular pencil and micron tip pens and nothing else. Yeah, that should be all. Okay.
Okay.
All right, then I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Miss. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.